So apparently I lost the audio again for the intro to this episode, so I'm going to film it again right now. I'm done using this little mic attachment that I have for the GoPro, but with that being said, on today's episode, we are going to be installing the RevLimiter gauge pods in my dashboard and the AEM gauges that go along with it. I've wanted these for a long time. They're really nice quality stuff. I've seen them in his car probably 100 times on the internet just because I constantly look at them. So I'm really hyped to put these in the car. They look awesome. At the point that I'm recording this, I've already finished the job, so I know they look sweet. This is going to be a long episode, so buckle down. It's got some good stuff in it, great parts, and the end result is awesome. So stick around and let's get to it. Apologies for the voiceover, but I can't really go back and re-record all of this. Some of the episode audio is missing, some of it isn't, so you'll see it cut in and out. With that being said, behind me here you can see the gauge pods from RevLimiter and the gauges from AEM that I've got. There's AFR, boost, and oil temperature. I know there's other options. I've installed gauge pillars, I've installed the under radio mounts. I'm just not a fan of gauge pillar pods. They just seem really they almost look like an afterthought. Whereas under radio gauges, I'm totally okay with. Cam has them in his car. I think they look great, and it actually looks really clean. But I've always wanted these for probably the last however many years I've had a Miata, 6 years. And now that I actually have boost and I can run these with reason, it's time to do that. So the first step of this project is going to be to tear the dashboard apart. So you got to take that crash pad off. It's not meant to come off from the factory. It's like siliconed on. So that's going to be the next step. It's a bit of a sketchy process, so tag along. So the first step here is to take the dashboard apart so you can get to the crash bar. We got to start with taking all the vents out. So I do this with a screwdriver. You can do it with wires, whatever works best for you. But eyeball vents have to come out. All three on this side of the dashboard. The one on the left side can stay. Tombstone comes out. Gauge hood has to come off, and then also the cluster around the steering wheel. So what you'll see me do here in a minute is lower the steering wheel to take all of this stuff off. My steering wheel has been raised. I took out that spacer plate above the steering column, so I need to actually drop that in order to get any of this stuff off. It's kind of a pain whenever I take it apart, but it's worth it in the long run. So you'll see that here in a second, and then once we get this part off, we will move forward and take the crash bar that you can see right here off. So the next step here is to take this bar off, or crash pad, foam pad, whatever you want to call it. It's not bolted to the dashboard. It's just ran with some strips of silicone on the backside from the factory. I've never taken one of these off before. I'm afraid of cracking it. I don't have a spare. Dylan does in his basement, which you'll actually have seen by now. He's flocking it, so he's not. I'm not going to be able to take that and use it, but there is a seam that runs along the bottom and the top here where it interfaces with the regular dashboard, and that's what I'm going to carefully pry along to try and just release the silicone from the backside. It's possible that using heat would help here to loosen the silicone up, but I don't know if the vinyl will survive any sort of heat. So what I have is this set of trim removal tools that I bought off Amazon. I'll try to put the link in the description. They're just plastic. They're really safe on really anything, paint, whatever. So if you're prying panels off and you need to get behind it and not scratch paint, I'd suggest these. So what I'm going to do here is start on one end and carefully keep inserting, put one tool in, insert the next tool next to it, and keep trying to slide it over to get the whole dashboard to pop off evenly. I don't want to kink it by working too hard on one side. So we're going to go ahead and start that. Yeah, well, let's see. Hopefully I don't break the dashboard. So once you've got the crash pad out of the car, you'll want to use this paper template that Adam from RevLimiter sends along with you. It's got hole cutouts and it's got a sort of a spacing template on it that's going to be extremely useful for you setting this up. So you can see there's some markings there. There's the inner foam line, and then there's an outer foam line, which is the one that I cut on, because that's going to be the easiest one to really reference anything off of, at least in my opinion. So your mileage may vary here. I cut out all three of these holes because I'm going to be running 3 gauge pods. If you're going to run 2, cut 2, 1, cut 1. It's easy as that. And then this template will then lay on top of the crash bar, and that's kind of how you're going to get your spacing and all that sort of stuff right. It is not a perfect template. Adam says that in the instructions. It's just kind of get you in the ballpark. You're going to have to do a lot of shaping and sculpting and whatnot. He does suggest using a drywall bit on a router, which was a lifesaver in this project, so I'll show that in the next couple steps here. But he puts some painter's tape down, or electrical tape, sorry, as a guide for the paper, and then you really want to make sure that everything is perfectly level for when you install these, so that you don't have one at a different height than the other, and things that are different clocking and whatnot. So take your time. Measure twice, measure 3 times before you cut. It's super critical because you can't go back once you've done some cuts into this. So the easiest method I found to aligning these with tape is to actually put a piece of tape on the bottom as a reference, right where there's a little step-in feature where the foam kind of bends in for where it meets the dashboard. And then I took a piece, so that obviously wasn't high enough, but I took a piece and put it 90 degrees to that to get my vertical alignment. This was kind of eyeball and kind of risky, but this piece I don't think really matters. And then I took another piece of tape and put it roughly a 1/4 inch farther up from the top seam of the bottom piece of tape. You can kind of see the overlap there. Just did a final measurement check to make sure everything was good. And that's what I'm going to use to reference the new hole marking on. So after this, you're going to take the piece of paper that you cut out earlier, and hopefully your holes are even and whatnot, because you're going to use the bottom of each to align it to that black piece of electrical tape. Tape this down, but make sure you've aligned it also to the leftmost point that we talked about earlier with the outer piece of the foam cutout for the tombstone. Once you've got that square, make sure it's pulled tight and everything is aligned, and tape it all down. And then you're going to start taking a silver Sharpie or whatever and marking the outside of each hole so that you know where to cut. So Lowe's and Home Depot were both out of the tool that I needed, but it turns out for $5 more, I can buy both the bit that I was looking for and the entire tool from everybody's favorite, Harbor Freight. So all this is a drywall cutter. So like if you were to cut out outlets and you already had drywall hung, you would just plunge this in and trace the box. It's just a rotary bit, and it's essentially a mini router. So I'm going to come in here, drop this in, trace the hole out roughly at a smaller diameter than what I need, and then I'm going to finish it with the actual Dremel and a sanding bit, and then do some test fits as I go and make sure it fits right, make sure everything's straight. That's probably going to be the longest part of the whole thing, but we're going to give this a shot. I've never used one of these admittedly, but it doesn't look too bad, so it's so new it's still got styrofoam on it. But alright, let's give this a shot. See what happens. So the first one's fit, and I kept playing with it because it didn't look like it was sitting right. And then I realized I had it kind of crooked like this, and the way these contour to the crash pad is that if it's off at all, it lifts away. So it looks like if I line it up straight, the fitment is perfect. On to the next one, and then this one is going to be kind of tricky because we're going to need to make sure we align it. Well, the third one's gonna be the worst, but we're gonna want to make sure we align it distance-wise. So whatever the gap from here to here is, we're gonna need to copy from here to here, and orientation-wise as well, because you don't want one to sit like that, one to sit like this, and then the other one to be way off the other way. So we're gonna take this one out now again with the plunge cutter, and then we're gonna finish it off with the Dremel. Hopefully a little better than this one, but. Yeah, let's try and knock these out. They're just loose fit in here right now. Like you can see, I can just pop them out. But as you can see by the dust, that was a lot of massaging to get them right. So what I did, and they came out pretty good in my opinion. They'll be straight once I bolt them in, but when I started, so I lined these up, and then once I had this one done, which can be kind of wherever, I set this one on top, and I saw kind of where this lip was going to overhang this, and once it fit in a little bit, I just kept removing from this side until it dropped over far enough that I had, this is probably like a 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch of clearance, and then on this one I did the same. I just set it in and then kind of kept removing material from over here until it would pocket over. Since these are sloped, they're not going to fit right in to a circle. It's an oval, so you got to kind of keep massaging it over until it fits where you want it. And then if it's not going over, make sure you're removing from the top and bottom as well, because since it's not a circle, you need to keep opening the wedge up, otherwise you're going to get stuck on these points and you'll just keep hogging material out back here and the part won't move and you'll end up with a hole kind of like what I have over here. The next step, I got to check the instructions, but I'm pretty sure we're going to kind of bolt these in place with, he sends these brackets that go on the back of the gauges, which I have right here. So we're going to kind of throw everything together there. So we're going to want to grab a microfiber, pop these guys out, give them a good clean. There's going to be dust everywhere, so I just shop vac everything. If you don't clean up while you're working, you're just going to keep getting dust on all sorts of, important parts that you don't want dust on. So these are all in theory identical, 1, 2, and 3, but just in case, since I cut them out specifically for them, like each hole, I'm going to keep them in order, just up here, 1, 2, 3. I don't want to go to put it together and find out that one's a little different and doesn't fit hole 3, and that hole 3 is already fixed in place. So let's flip this over and see what we got on the back, besides a mess. So he sends little brackets that we need to install the gauges first, but these little brackets work by the gauge pot sits in here and the gauge itself sits on this lip, and then when that's in this pocket, this here will then sit on these, on like the remaining surface that you have on each of these holes, and it sandwiches it all together. So we're going to take the gauges out, get them all in order for what we want where, and we're going to start bolting it together. So the layout I'm going to go with left to right is going to be air to fuel ratio, because that's most important, and then boost, and then all the way on the right it's going to be oil temp. Air to fuel is going to be most important, because if that goes wrong, then I want to be able to shut the car off in time. Boost is going to be next, because it's, you know, if I'm running high or low, this is going to be what's changing second most frequently to air to fuel ratio. And oil temp, in theory, should be very steady. So I shouldn't have to check this one as often. I should be able to see it creeping up if it is. The nice thing about these is they have a digital readout in the center. So this will tell me like 200 degrees. But it'll also have a sort of analog, but it's still digital sweep on the outside. So it'll sit both at 200 and 200 here. Whereas just an analog gauge, I can't do a quick visual check by staring at it unless I know exactly where all the numbers are. And just a digital gauge, you know, you got to know what is within your acceptable range. So this will actually, they'll be green, and then it'll go yellow as it gets outside of a safe range, and it'll start to go red if it gets, you know, into a really bad range. So it's a good visual check system. It's the same for all three of these. This one just has a sweep gauge, so it'll go vacuum is on the left here. Once you hit 0, you get a positive boost, and you run up to 35 psi, which we shouldn't be getting near anyways. And I'm going to have boost cut set up so that if I do get to, you know, above whatever 22, 23 psi, it kills power. And then air to fuel, same thing. So it wants to sit right around 14.7. If it gets above 15 or below 13, I believe, or below 12 maybe, it'll change to yellow, and it'll show me that, you know, I'm not in a good range for where I should be, and I need to pull over and something's wrong. So these are all nice, super nice gauges, pretty expensive for what they are. But I'm a big fan of buying something once instead of buying some knockoff gauge for a couple $100 now and then having to go buy another set of gauges down the road. So we're going to go right off the bat with the good stuff, and we're going to start to kind of finagle these in place here. So these are a really nice fit. Adam hand makes each one of these. So they are, you know, this is perfectly fit inside of that gauge right there. And that's tight, but it's not, you know, it's not a, I don't have to machine or Dremel anything out of this for this to fit perfectly, which is really nice. Cam, on Cam's turbo swap, we actually had to grind open the faceplate that he got, which was not from RevLimiter, it was from somebody else. And it just didn't fit as well, so I figured I would go this route instead of, you know, his doesn't look bad, but I think this looks cooler. So this will then sit in here like this, and I will be able to, so as you can see, it's cocked. So from the driver's seat, I'll be able to see it just by glancing over, like if I'm looking at the radio or something, it's going to be in the same line of sight. So now we're going to want to make sure it's straight. You can always fiddle with this a little more later, but make sure it's, you know, level to your eye, which it's still not. Maybe a little more. There we go. So this gauge is level, and then what we're going to do using these brackets that he sent, which we're going to have to modify a little bit, is this is going to slip over the back here, and these holes on the back of this bracket will slide through here, and then we'll tighten those down with the nuts that AEM provides. This is very long because different gauges all have different lengths for the back. So he sends it oversized, and then you can chop it down. So I'm just going to measure the gap from the hole here to the screw and take off probably another ½ inch on top of that on the side here. And I'll do that with just a cutoff wheel or something like that. And then that should slip right over and hold in place. So I took right about 2 centimeters off of this, which is just shy of an inch. This is really thin, not thin, but really pliable metal. It's just some aluminum, nothing crazy. And he's put these nice little relief cuts in it. So it does take a little bit of bending in order to get everything to sit right. He tries to get them close beforehand, but that's just the nature of it. So I'm going to bend this bracket out so that it sits totally flush on this here. I'm going to do it with some pliers so I stop cutting myself. Just like that. So then we'll take the nuts that AEM supplies. So I'm going to want to bend that out a little more. It's just not the right spot. And also the gauge isn't totally straight, so we'll go ahead and address that in a minute. But there you go. Gauge is more or less mounted. And then we'll just copy that on the other two that are over here. I got to figure out what to do with this hole here that I made. So there you go. That's solid for now. The reason we're going to put the metal in is so that eventually these backer plates don't come punching through in the intersections here. So we're going to get to that now, but everything looks good from the outside. You can essentially throw this in and call it done if you wanted to, but I think it looks pretty sweet. Everything's lined up really nice. This one could be cocked up a little bit. There we go. But you'll figure that out right before you tighten everything in place. So all in all, pretty pumped about it. So the next thing we're going to want to do is glue these little metal plates on. It's just aluminum. The two end pieces, Adam suggests you bend them kind of like this. So what they're going to do is they're going to sit in the ends of the bracket right here on either side, and it's going to give the leg that you bent earlier something to push up against. And then, like we were talking about earlier, the ones that we're going to put in the center here will act as just landing zones for the feet on the other brackets. So we're going to do that. I'm using super glue gel. It's just kind of whatever I have. Gorilla Glue gel, sorry. It's whatever I have on hand. Anything that's kind of like this will work. He uses something called Goop. Dries in like 2 hours. This dries in like 15 minutes. So I tacked them all in place with super glue. They're pretty solid. It's been about, 5 minutes. I'm going to put the brackets back in with the gauges to kind of squeeze everything together, make sure it all holds. So yeah, you've already seen that, so I'm just going to time lapse you through it, and we'll get it done. So I had to fiddle with it a bunch, but here it is. It's all done, at least on the crash pad side of things. I noticed that I can only install it if I start on the first one and work my way over it, just the way the brackets stack up. I don't think it calls for it in the instructions, but I'm going to be taking one of these off at a time and putting some red Loctite on each of these. This car with the polyurethane mounts that are in it vibrates a lot, and the last thing I want is for these to come loose while I'm driving around. So I'm going to do that next, and then we're going to go ahead and cut the inside of the dashboard open so that these can sit inside. And hopefully today we'll end with kind of plugging these wires in and pressing it into the dashboard so it can cure overnight, and then tomorrow I'll run the wires down, hook them into the ECU. I got to order a wideband for this guy. Boost, this is just going to be a vacuum line running out to the engine bay, which I'll tee off once the turbo's in there and stuff like that. And then oil temp, I'm just going to tee off right by the passenger side front by the VTEC solenoid. There's a port there that I'm going to use for my oil feed for the turbo, my oil pressure gauge on the dash, and now my oil temp, so I'm going to get kind of like a three-way bung. It is a lot of things to read off of one port, but I think it's most accurate to have oil temp and pressure right before it goes into the turbo, because that way I can constantly monitor, like if I see oil temp drop, or oil temp spike and oil pressure drop, I can just kill it, before it starts the turbo or makes its way too far around the block. So we're gonna use that as our point, but the crash pad is done. I think it looks sick. Can't wait to see it in the car. So we're gonna Loctite these and we're gonna get that cut open. Final step that I almost forgot is going to be to safety wire these together. So we're gonna run safety wire from the inside of this one to the outside of this one, the inside of here to the inside of here, and then the inside of here to the inside of here, just to make sure everything stays together. This stuff is super sharp. If you've never used safety wire before, you're going to want a pair of gloves, and to be very careful, this will stab right through gloves. So I'm going to go put some gloves on. We're going to put it in there. We're just going to kind of twist tie it. It's not going to be anything crazy, but it'll just buy us whatever third level of safety here. The next part is going to be cutting out the backing of the dashboard. There's this like kind of washboard looking plastic fixture there. We got to cut that out because this sticks out well beyond that, and we need this to pocket inside of that. Per Adam's instructions, a Dremel with a cutoff wheel will do the trick. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to cut off, you can see I marked Silver Sharpie. It's like 14 inches long. I'm going to start around 12.5 to 13 inches and cut that out, and then if I need more, I'll add more. I have the crash pad right here, so I can test fit it whenever I'm ready, and then I can keep cutting and keep cutting and keep cutting. So we're going to get started. I'm going to adjust this real quick. Got my sweet safety glasses on.
One eternity later.
So I don't know if this is because of the model year. This car's a 91 for future reference, but I have this weird bracket behind my dashboard. If I look at Adam's pictures, he just has these brackets down here, and this is what I was fighting the entire time that I was trying to take this plastic cover off. So it feels like it's just held in with one Phillips head screw back here. So I'm going to drop the glove box, which I'm going to have to do anyways to run the wires. And I'm going to see if I can get, I think I can get a shorty flathead back here. Or maybe a long one with a weird angle, but we'll try that. I'll bring them both. Once this is out, then we can test fit the gauges. So I got it out. This is what it looks like. It's sat up in here. And all that was holding it on was this stubborn Phillips head screw, which there's not enough room, short or long, to get a screw in there, or a screwdriver in there. So I ended up having to, where'd it go? Use a 1/4-inch screw, 1/4-inch wrench, and a, like, what goes in the end of one of those adaptable screwdriver pieces, and then I put pressure on the back of it and just did kind of like quarter turns until it came loose enough that I could put pliers on it. And then once I got pliers on it, it was a little easier. And then after a while, I could just grab it with my finger and kind of slowly back it out. So that's out, which means we should be able to test fit our dashboard in there, which is here. So this guy, so we got to cut a little more to the left here. Take probably out to the left side of this little output here, and then we should have plenty of room. Fits over here really nice, but need another couple inches. So it should sit up there like this, where it's fully seated down here, it's fully seated up here, It's not bowing out anywhere. Over here is a little different because there's nothing actually holding it in place there. But the next step is going to be, we're going to plug the wires into the back of these and kind of just feed them out down here for now. And then we're going to silicone this in place so that it can dry overnight, and then tomorrow I'll start running wiring to where it needs to go. So this part's going to get kind of tricky because I don't want to wait too long to set everything up. So what we're going to do is we're going to put silicone all the way around here and any mating surfaces and things like that. And then we're going to hold the dashboard in place with kind of whatever you've got around the house. So I'm going to take this guy, pinch it between the seat and the dash, and then on the driver's side I'm using the tripod that this camera's supposed to be on. I'm going to pinch it between the seat and the dash over there, and that should hold everything in place. I'm going to put the tombstone back in as well so that it can kind of hold this seal together, and hopefully that's enough. It shouldn't need a whole lot. There wasn't a lot on there from the factory, so I can't hold the camera, spray sealant, and use the tripod to hold the dash at the same time, so I'm just going to kind of cut to it for you guys. But yeah, pretty simple. Just put some sealant around the whole thing, press it against the dash, let it sit until tomorrow, and it should be good. Well, there you have it. That's what it looks like from the driver's seat for today. I will be powering them up tomorrow once I run power to them and everything. The interior is all back together. It's kind of hard to see in this footage, but I put all of this back together in the hopes that it helps hold the dashboard together. I waited about an hour and made sure that it was pretty solid. The dry time on the silicone I use is about an hour until it's paintable. It's like 7 to 14 days of full cure, so this car's not going to move for, I don't know, 4 months, much less 14 days. So as long as I'm not prying on it or anything, this should be fine. One thing I did notice over here when I was putting the glove box back in, I routed the wiring for both of these kind of this way and this one around the left side. There's nothing to route them around, but it's just the way they flowed the best. And these two wiring harnesses were getting in the way of the glove box closing. So what I ended up doing is I routed them over the crash bar that's underneath here. It's a really tight fit. This one's still underneath for now. It's got 2 plugs on it, so I don't know if I really want to screw with it. It closes fine and everything now, but I snuck these over top, and this one is tucked way over to the left so that this thing can close. You can see just like that. Everything works as it should. And all of the wiring is still down here. Tomorrow I'll pull all this carpet back and start running power and things like that. So yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow, which is going to be instantaneous for you, but that's a wrap for me tonight. So we're back. It's the next day, and we're going to do some wiring and hopefully wrap up the gauge install for as far as I can get today. I ordered a wideband sensor wideband O2 sensor that's just going to run right to the gauge. It was like $40 on Amazon, so instead of trying to figure out how to splice my one that goes to the ECU, I'm going to run one to the ECU, one to the wideband gauge, and hopefully tee off from the wideband gauge back to the ECU. So I don't know if I can run, I think I can run 2 readouts in the ECU, so I'm going to do that and just kind of have some sort of fail-safe or whatever. So until that comes in, the only things I can really do today are run power and ground to all 3 gauges, which is going to be really easy. I'm just going to tap into the 12-volt switched power from the radio. And for ground, I'm just going to pick a chassis ground that's right next to where the ECU is grounded, or close to at least. And then that'll be it. And then I'm going to take the crossover pipe that you saw last episode that's broken, and take it to my buddy James, who you saw last year. He welded the exhaust for this thing. This crossover pipe was not his doing. This is part of the kit that came from KMiata. I am apparently not the only one with this issue. Like 3 or 4 people reached out to me and said theirs all broke in the same place. So it's just definitely some garbage welds on a not strong piece of metal. So I'm going to kind of sit down with James today and see if we can figure out a way to fix that and make it not happen again. And yeah, that way that's reinforced. So by the end of this episode, the gauges will be in, which they already are. The gauges will have power, and the exhaust will be fixed for now, since we got to do V-bands and stuff down the road. But we'll be as far as we can get for that for now. So that's it for the garage today. I've decided I'm not going to run the lines for the boost pressure or anything like that. We're going to take the crossover pipe for the exhaust and we're going to run to James's shop and have him weld it up. So I'm just going to bring this GoPro along, see what I can capture. He doesn't really care if I record or not, so we're going to get some footage of that. That should really be it for this episode. Probably a pretty long one based on how many days it's taken me to record this. So that should be a wrap on the whole setup. I'll put a link to those gauge pods down below and where I got the AEM gauges from Summit, just so that if you guys want to replicate this, you can do it yourself, as well as Amazon links to anything I bought from Amazon. So yeah, that's a wrap. I'll see you guys next week when we're going to work on putting the DeechWorks 400 fuel pump and changing all this fuel system over to that side. It's going to be a big project. I'm going to start it probably tomorrow. So thanks for watching. Thanks for liking, and make sure to subscribe and comment down below what you think. And I'll see you next Saturday.